Okay, welcome back. So this is into the third segment of our conversation with Father Graham, and this segment's going to be led by Alison O'Keefe. So over to you, Alison.
Good evening, Father. Thank you for this opportunity to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Following on from Simon's questions about the synod, one of the topics that came up in the workshop was the role of women in the church. Do you see anything changing regarding the role of women in the church in the foreseeable future?
I think the role of women has got to change in the church. I think that women have to be given positions of leadership. They have to be given positions of authority, and they need to be in positions of decision making. That started to change slightly at the top level with certain religious sisters and lay women being appointed to senior roles within the Curia. That needs to happen at diocesan level, it needs to happen at local level. And the voice of women needs to be heard. Whether, as came up at the synod and as was pointed out, the discussion of women priests is not in our remit, and I don't think that's going to change in the foreseeable future, if ever. But I think one of the mistakes that we've made is that we've taken the model of church as we have it now, which is very clerical, and we've said we need to give women a voice within the church, therefore they must become clerics. Where what I would rather see is to say we need to give women a voice in the church and positions of authority, therefore we must become less clerical. And if that happens, there is no reason why women shouldn't have the influence in the church that is rightfully theirs and guide us in ways that has not been the reality up until now, because we have been a very clerical and therefore by definition male dominated church. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. So thinking more of our place within the wider community of Chorley, we talk about the Catholicism being the one true faith. And as a convert, I feel that I can comment on this. I feel that a lot of Catholics actually tend to disregard the other faith and don't really feel the need to get involved with them at all. What are your thoughts about the Catholic Church's relationship with the other faiths in the town, and particularly with the Muslim faith?
I think to say that the Catholic faith is the one true faith, to be fair, if you ask Muslims would say that they were the one true faith as well. So if you believe in something, you believe it to be true. So I don't think to say that we are the one true church, with all the caveats that go with that, it's a misunderstanding the way it was. But I would say that we're not the only church that would claim that. The fact that the Catholic Church felt that it didn't need to engage with the other Christian churches. Again, there was part of that was that other Christian churches wouldn't even allow us to be there. And that is still the case in many parts of the country. The strictest evangelicals will walk out when if a Catholic presence. Lots of evangelicals put pressure on other Protestant churches who engage with the Catholic Church. So it's not all one-sided, to be fair. But the joke of Catholics believe they're the only ones in heaven has, as with all good jokes, a grain of truth in it. I think the reality is none of the churches now can function on their own and claim to be, the Christian churches claiming to be fulfilling what Christ has asked them to do. So we need to work together, and I think in Chorley we are particularly blessed that across the board there is a great understanding, respect for each other's traditions, support for the work that those traditions and those churches are doing. We're not in competition with each other. So if one church is doing something, the other churches are happy to support them in doing that rather than set up a rival alternative. The ministers get on very well at one of the best conferences that I've been involved in of interfaith, of interchurch. When it comes to interfaith, we've been blessed with having a female Muslim mayor, and all the work that she did in inviting us in to understand her faith and share her faith and draw her faith into working alongside the Christian faith and others. There is a long way to go with interfaith dialogue, and it's not an area that I am particularly well versed in, though I did try to study Christian approaches to Islam when I was at university. But there is a lot of work. At least what I can say in Chorley is that there is a mutual respect of the different faiths, though I don't think we're anywhere near working together as well as we could be or should be.
Thank you. Those of us that are involved with Chorley Buddies in the town, since the beginning of the lockdown and the coronavirus, have found that we've been working increasingly with refugees, and we've heard that we'll soon be welcoming more refugees into the town. Is there any way the faith community can be more instrumental in helping them to settle down and feel at home in the town?
From my experience elsewhere, the faith communities are essential in making refugees feel at home and welcome, because many of them are refugees because of their faith, and therefore their faith is important to them and they need the support of their faith community. They also need to know that the other faith communities are there to support them, because often it was those other faith communities in their own country that was persecuting them. So we all have a role to play in making them welcome, and all the faith communities have a role to play. Again, I think we need to find out who are coming, where they're coming from, what faith they are, to best support them and the faith community in our area to do the best for them. It is also a case that we need to work together to see what we can provide for them. Governments government approach to refugees is very clinical, and therefore it's left to charities and faith groups to add that personal face and touch. So when we find out who are coming, numbers and what is needed, I'm sure the faith communities will step up to the mark and do as much as we can to make sure that those refugees become part of our community, feel part of our community, and feel welcomed in our community.
Thank you very much, Father, for your answers. I'll hand you back now to Paul to see if anybody else has got any supplementary questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Alison. Some really thought-provoking stuff there. I know the SVP across the pastoral area is working with refugee families, Muslim families. I know St Mary's SVP is working with a Nigerian refugee. We're working with at least 2 refugee families to try to help them in a difficult time for them. So what Father said is, I think, happening. I think we could do an awful lot more of it. But Simon, have you any questions for Father?
There were some really interesting thoughts there. I just wonder, Father, in terms of leadership positions for women, what sort of things do you think might be appropriate? I don't know, appropriate. What are the sort of ideas do you have about that? I'm just interested. I've got 4 children and 3 of them are girls. And when we had the question and answer session at the parish centre during the synod, well, pre-COVID, I had a nice question time, and it was really interesting to see a female clergy come from, I think, the Church of England. And I just wondered around leadership in the church, how that might look for my girls to aspire to in the future.
Yeah, well, Pope Francis is initiating and exploring female deacons if we're going down the clerical route. But as I said, I think the model at the moment still is, if you want to have a position of authority, you need to be a cleric. For instance, if we had a deanery pastoral council, and the deanery pastoral council was setting the agenda for what were our priorities, and the chair of that pastoral council was a woman, that would be a position of authority and leadership. But at the moment, the danger is that we see women, we need to have women in our positions of authority. Therefore, they must be clerics. It was interesting that you said there was a female cleric. There was also a female youth worker, who also, I thought, spoke incredibly well. Some of our best theologians are females, and let's hear them on theology, as opposed to, they seem to hit the press when they're talking about theology and its impact on females. They're not female theologians in that sense. They are theologians who are female and have something to say to us all about theology. So there are lots of ways of leadership and authority, positions of authority in the church, that can be open to women. But one of the things I would want to say is, we need to, and I say this as a priest, we need to be less clerical. One of the sadnesses for me, and I can understand why it happened, was when women got ordained in the Anglican Church, they all put on a clerical shirt and a clerical collar, because that they needed to be seen as clerics. I would have much preferred them to have stayed in their beautiful clothes that I used to see them training in Durham, and say, no, I don't want to dress as men. And equally, as one of them said when a priest said that to her, who he was wearing a cassock at the time, she said, I find it really odd that a priest would say that to me who's wearing a dress. So it's about, let's show that you can, priesthood is about service, not authority. Women have a role of service as well, and how do we allow them that? But they also have a role of leadership and authority that we need to see in the church.
Okay, thanks very much, Father. Linda, have you got any questions?
Just an observation, really, Paul, that we've talked about a number of things. So the role of women, we've talked about support for refugee families, we've talked about interfaith dialogue, and actually all those things are covered by organisations like the SVP, like the Buddies, who actually are doing that work of going into the community and doing it regardless of the faith of the people they are helping, seeing the need and responding to that. And surely that's the way forward, is in those sort of organisations that are becoming increasingly more important in our communities. So yeah, a big well done to the Buddies tonight, I think.
Thank you very much. That finishes this segment of the video. I hope you'll join us for the next segment, which will be a fascinating look at the questions that were gathered from Holy Cross High School. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.